welcome to Quest. I am feeling so strange right now. This is a morning record.
A morning record. We've both got that morning energy. We've had 9 cups of coffee each.
I'm literally drinking my morning mug of cold jug of coffee.
Just
right now.
a mug of dirt. Some of the old Java.
I'm Ben. I'm here with
Jess. That's me.
There it is.
I wasn't ready. Usually there's like a big buildup. I don't know. Yeah. Hey, it's me, Jess, and that's Ben over there. And Ben, I have a special surprise for you today.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm awake at this hour. What's up?
Well, I've brought along a special guest to our podcast clubhouse.
What?
That's right. Here at the studios where we record in beautiful downtown Burbank. I've brought along a legend in the adventure gaming scene. I've brought along the one and only Richard Cobbett.
Hi.
Hello there.
Now, I have to say, Jess, I prepared for your surprise by writing a short bio to bring him in.
Wow, that's how in sync we are. I mean, that's how you know we've been podcasting for like 11 episodes now.
Richard Cobbett is a game developer who's worked on Sunless Sea and Skies, Not Tonight, Beyond a Steel Sky, The Long Journey Home, and more. Before that, he was a journalist at Rock Paper Shotgun, Eurogamer, PC Gamer, and more. Currently, his project is the game Nighthawks, a vampire RPG being published by Wadjet Eye Games. There it is. Now it's all formal.
Richard, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're excited to talk to you today. So, what we wanted to chat about today, as is often our tendency to do, is adventure games. But as you know, we are strictly forbidden from diving into adventure game discussion before we've asked one another, what are you playing? So maybe, Ben, I'll pass the mic to you. Ben, what are you playing?
So I'm gonna do something we've never done before. I'm gonna break the rules. I'm gonna break the rules here. I'm gonna say, but you know what? This is very human. Everyone's going to relate to me intensely when I say this, which is to say, I'm playing a game I've already said I've been playing because I'm still playing it.
That's easy content. I mean, come on.
Every week we come in, I've said a different game.
If you're going to talk about UFO 50 again, I'm leaving for 10 minutes. If this is going to be more UFO 50 talk, I'm out of here.
Well, number one, listen, all those times for weeks. Richard, did you play UFO 50?
Not yet, no.
Oh, it's so good.
It's on my list.
But I'm still playing Dragon Quest 3 Hidden Dragons Edition because it's a JRPG, which means that it is long. So, I don't know what to tell you. I'm up to the final boss, and all my guys aren't strong enough. So I just gotta walk them around in a circle until they get strong enough, and then they're gonna walk up to the boss and kill him. And I'm not. And this is what I'll add to preview. I don't do post game. I don't do post game content. Those credits roll. I'm done. I'm out of here.
Yeah,
I'm out the door.
I'm actually out of there before the credits roll because I don't care who made the game. I just care that I enjoyed it.
And also, that's the same with movies. I have no idea what's going on in Marvel films. I don't know who's going to show up next. I'm out the door. I'm out the door. The credits start. I'm out. I don't care who worked on this.
Yeah.
So Richard, you work in game development?
Well, Ben, I'm glad to hear what you've been playing. Richard, why don't you jump in? Let's hear what you've been playing lately. I hope it isn't the same things Ben has been playing because this is going to get really repetitive.
I don't think so. Not precisely. No, I've been trying and failing to play the new Dragon Age, which just doesn't like my PC, and so instead I've been finishing off. I'm going to get the name wrong. I know this. Metaphor Refantasia.
I think that's correct.
The Persona guy. So I'm a huge fan of the Persona series. And it's been quite nice to have something a bit different to sink into.
Yeah. So okay, how far? Because this is also a particularly lengthy JRPG. How far would you say you've gotten into Metaphor?
Oh, I finished it.
Oh, you finished it. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I'm currently waiting until basically the Christmas break, because we're recording this, the week or so before Christmas. That's basically when I'm planning to catch up on my adventure games. because I don't know about you guys, but I sort of need to be in a very good state of mind to be playing adventures. And at the moment, it's sort of been more like I need to hit things, and
Yeah.
enjoy having the simulated ability to have friends, and all of that kind of stuff, which you kind of get more from RPGs.
Yeah.
But like the crisp side, it's going to be like Crimson Diamond, UFO,
Oh, Crimson Diamond's good.
tons of stuff from my backlog, which I want to kind of get a good chunk out of.
Yeah. Cool. Jess, what are you playing?
What have I been playing? This is a great question. I just wrapped up streaming, and that's our cheating too. Like talking about the game I've been streaming. Everyone who watches my Twitch channel already knows. I just finished up playing Space Quest 6 for the first time in a really long time. I'm pretty sure that I had not played Space Quest 6 start to finish since I played it for the first time in 1995. I think I played it in 1995, hastily wrote a walkthrough down, uploaded it to my Space Quest fan site, and then never returned to Space Quest 6 again.
The good thing about Space Quest 6, if you play through it once, you've actually done probably more than either of the writers.
That's exactly right. I mean, here's the thing. Space Quest 6 was.
I love Josh Mandel. It's
absolutely, yeah.
I mean that with love. He's amazing.
No, I mean, everything I've ever written, and especially all the things I've overwritten in my lifetime, have been inspired by Josh Mandel. I love his work on these games. And Space Quest 6 is fine. It's not my favorite of the series, but there's good stuff in there. I mean, Gary Owens is fantastic. He is much better in Space Quest 6 than he was in Space Quest 4. I kind of like the cartoonish aesthetic. Space Quest 6 is fine. It's not my favorite. It maybe isn't in my top 5 or 6, but
watching you play it, it was it made me think just kind of how like there's parts in it where like I saw you playing and going like, wow, like this part really, really works. This is really funny and it really works. And then like it just goes into a very lengthy and dull segment for like another 2 or 3 hours.
It's sort of the problem. It's sort of the problem when one of your designers does lots and lots of research on the workings of the human body, then your second designer doesn't include any of it. So you're sort of a bit lost in the biology stuff of it. And again, there's something about Scott. I love the Space Quest series as a whole. It's just with that specific game, you can sort of tell screen by screen whose baby it was. And for me, it's like if every pixel has a joke, then you know that it's Josh Mandel. And I really like those screens. And when you kind of get towards the end, where you have this real sense of please be over, please be over, please be over, kind of emanating from the game itself, then I'm a bit less into it.
There was definitely, when I was watching you finish it, Jess, I think we all felt that please be over. The game radiated it, and then it was being reflected back. It was actually quite perfect. It made a perfect, brilliant band of light between the two, just reflecting the same exact thing back and forth.
I could tell it was happening.
It was great.
I can see in chat everybody's like, "Is this almost over, Jess?" Which how you know that you've really hit your mark as a streamer. So yeah, played Space Quest 6. Maybe I will play it again in 29 years.
I'll see you again in 29 years. It's
I don't even know what
Palmer
year that will be. Like, is that like? That's in the far-flung future. That's I don't plan to be around for the next time my scheduled Space Quest 6 playthrough is up for grabs. But yeah, there you have it. That's what I've been playing. Now, let's get on to the important stuff. Richard, again, welcome to the podcast. We are very excited to talk adventure games with you, and maybe start out with a question that I'm curious about. Ben and I have talked a lot about our earliest adventure game experiences. How did you end up sort of getting introduced to this genre? What were some of the first games you played, the ones that really made an impression?
This is where it gets slightly awkward because my first adventure games were all pirated. They came with the first PC that we owned, which was a 8086, which ran at about 4-6 megahertz, and it came basically with a big box of floppy disks with handwritten labels. And one of
They
the
were
first
all authorized backups. They were all authorized
absolutely.
backups.
And one of the first games I played when I was far too young to be playing it was Leisure Suit Larry 1,
So many,
which was one of the floppies that came basically with my PC, and I was far too young to have any idea what was going on in it. I just knew that it was a cool, like, walking around a city and like doing things, and it had this real sense of being in a world. And that's kind of what I really kind of came to love about adventure games. And I played a lot of text adventures at the same time. Again, usually not the commercial ones. I had some from like Level 9 and Magnetic Scrolls and kind of the other, and Infocom, of course. But they weren't particularly big on the PC. At least not in the UK. They kind of tended to be more on like other computers. So I would sort of come to a lot of those later on, or be playing the free ones. Two which come to mind immediately were actually cover disc games, Jacaranda Jim and Humbug, which are both written by a guy called...
I've never heard of.
Well, they were
You're
both
just messing with us, are you?
No, not at all. They were both written by a guy called Graham Cluley, who later became a very well-known figure in the antivirus world. But he basically wrote, I don't know if he wrote Jacaranda Jim specifically for the magazine, but he did write Humbug because it was like a special send-off and received this along with some other games kind of deal. And they were like some of the first adventure games that really spoke to what I wanted in games. I mean, I kind of enjoyed the arcade stuff as well, but it was always that sense of being able to step into a world, to interact with people, to have this sort of sense of actually escaping into this new place. And I know that with Leisure Suit Larry in particular, it was kind of funny because my dad actually used this at work as a way of getting people comfortable with how to use computers. Obviously not the sexy time stuff, but the go into the bar, order a drink from the bartender, the sort of stuff which you kind of got. And it probably says something about me that the other people who played it, these grown-ups who should have been playing it, never worked out you could leave the bar. They never figured out you could call a taxi, and there was actually a whole game outside of lefties. And until so I played this game, and like quite often, it would be a case of if I went into a new room, it'd be like kind of I'm going to just take a look at that before I let you play this. But then very quickly realized that if I wanted to play something on the computer, I was going to play that thing on the computer.
Right.
When I was about 10 or so, my parents told me that they considered getting some parental control software, but then realized I would have to install it for them. And so it was a bit pointless.
Now was Jacaranda... I unfortunately I can't let this go. Was Jacaranda the gym like also like within the tone of Leisure Suit Larry? Because unfortunately that's all I can think of.
It's more Space Quest. It's Jacaranda Jim, not Jack Around the Gym. It's a space adventure about I don't actually remember what he is, but it's him and his friend Alan the Gribbly, or Alan the Gribbler, or something on those sort of lines, having a very Zork-style adventure I think they crash land on a planet, which is sort of full of things like thieves who are always trying to steal your things. Again, very Zork. And so I basically kind of grew up playing, mostly the Sierra and LucasArts and Revolution, and basically anything I could get my hands on. And like things like Infocom, I had to pick up bit by bit, as they sort of came out. So I had Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which, spoiler, is not a good game. I really wish people would go back and play it. It's not a good game. I'm sorry. Play a Mind Forever Voyaging. A Mind Forever Voyaging is brilliant. That is the game which everyone should be praising. Hitchhiker's Guide I could best sum up by the fact that nobody ever talks fondly about bureaucracy. Great license, great books, and they carry the game like a team of Sherpas. And like I said, I played at friends' houses who had other computers. I would play mostly on their machines. It would be text adventures. Then kind of on mine, it would be PC, and kind of going from CGA up to BGA, and basically getting my hand as much stuff as possible. And then later on, when the internet came out, making preemptive backups of a few games.
Now, what I will say, about bureaucracy, I'll say a couple things about bureaucracy. One is that bureaucracy had an incredible, like the feelies for it, the Infocom feelies. Modern Paranoia magazine is really funny. but there's Modern Paranoia or something like that magazine, which is very funny, and it has a great cover. The
And
cover, which is
having the location called the Paranoia Complex is a brilliant joke.
yeah. There's. I mean, also, I don't think he really worked on it. Didn't he like kind of outsource it to a friend of his?
So
to
much
work
like
with him on it?
much like Hitchhikers.
Yes.
Yeah.
With diminishing returns.
I
Much
don't
like
I don't remember
Hitchhikers.
who wrote Bureaucracy, but obviously I think Hitchhikers was mostly a Steve Moretsky gig.
Yeah, it was Morrissette, I believe. Yeah, I've never gotten very far. Jess, you beat Hitchhikers, but you were using a walkthrough.
Oh yeah,
to
I mean, I
play,
beat
right?
Hitchhikers, which is to say, I entered a series of commands I read verbatim online, and pushed return after each one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, Hitchhikers, man. It's I love the source material, and I feel like if you are both intimately familiar with the source material and a close personal friend of Steve Moretsky, possibly you could finish that game with no sort of help, or if you have some sort of like being John Malkovich portal into the mind of Steve Moretsky, maybe that would also work.
Well,
But yeah,
otherwise you would get a headache which no Buffett analgesic would be able to solve.
absolutely no. Yeah, it was an experience. I mean, there were bits that were fun, but no, it's not for me. I need to play more Infocom though. I have a limited data set to compare to.
A mind forever voyaging.
Yes.
I am curious here then, like, so you played all how we talked about this on our the first one we recorded. How do you play an adventure game? Do you take notes? Do you draw a map? Do you like how do you solve like an adventure game when you're playing it?
Mostly without notes. It sort of it sort of depends. If I was reviewing one, then I would take notes because I'd sort of need to look back and just remind myself. But if I'm playing them normally, then generally I will brute force mazes using the old Batman just turn left all the time trick. And otherwise, I tend to kind of like play them in like I don't know, maybe 1 to 3 like mega sittings, rather than like sort of it over a long period of time, because otherwise I forget all the details. And so I don't really need notes for the most part.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there's something like a dedicated puzzle game, like say a Myst or a Traitor's Gate or something like that, then then I'll take notes. But if it's just like a regular, Sierra, LucasArts, game along those sorts of lines, which isn't like specifically a detective game. Obviously, something like Laura Bow is different, but if it was like a Space Quest or similar, then no, I just keep it in my head.
And how do you feel about like really puzzly puzzles? If you understand what I mean by that, when you get like a screen, like so you'll be playing a game, then you get a screen and you see like
13 buttons and some
grid
levers
of 8 blocks, and there's a flashing light.
There's a giant chess piece. Maybe.
Like,
I would say that I'm not a big fan of what I was thinking of as interface puzzles. Which are like the big kind of sort of screens, and it depends on the game. And for me, it really depends. Like, are you wasting my time? If it's like a dedicated puzzle game, like say Zork Grand Inquisitor, which is fantastic. Cool.
One of my favorite puzzles.
I am totally into like mine too. Actually, several of my favorite puzzles. I think that's a brilliantly designed game. But it's something like that. You buy into that as like how the world works. If I'm playing something like, say, I don't know, an Indiana Jones game, and then suddenly it's like, and now we're going to slow down so you can do this very obviously bullshit adventure game puzzle, I don't particularly like that. And if it's one of what I refer to as the elder puzzles, I get angry. Which is like
Towers of Hanoi.
Towers of Hanoi, sliding block puzzles, anything which basically you would find in 101 puzzles for slightly smart kids. Sort of type things. Like basically, if I'm playing through it like a game and the action is stopped so that I can put like queens on a chessboard so they don't kind of cross, you have really got to earn that. And the only way in which I'll generally accept it is, I think the early Tex Murphy games actually did. Well, not the early, but the mid.
The pre-FMV ones.
No, the FMV ones.
Okay.
I think they generally did a pretty good job of wrapping it in enough fiction that I could get behind it. Like they'd have one which was basically crossing the river. The whole thing where you've got like multiple animals or
Like
whatever.
there's like a wolf, a lamb, and a bale of hay.
That's the one. And in like Pandora Directive, I think it's Pandora Directive. They've
It's
got
not in
one which
Killing Moon.
no, but the thing is, in Pandora Directive, they've got that which is sort of like with a bomb, and it's like moving neutrons kind of across. I may be like forgetting about the details exactly, something like that. And it's like that even though like objectively, yes, that's like one of those puzzles. I can accept that. Okay, this is just a cool way of defusing a bomb in a more interesting way than finding a thing. But then you get something like Tesla Effect, and it's just straight up, we're going to put these puzzles onto a big screen in front of you, and you are going to solve them so you can move to the next room where there's another one. That gets me cross. It gets me both because it's an unoriginal puzzle, and it's, and again, not Tesla Effect, but like when I sort of see those kind of puzzles, it feels lazy because it's just like we've just dumped a puzzle in front of you. And it's like, either come up with something original and interesting, or just let me walk past and get on with the story. That's kind of how I roll with puzzles, which is probably why in like about 3 games that I've written in a parody of one of those puzzles. So Sunless Sea, for instance, there's a section on one of the islands I wrote for that game, the Isle of Hands, which is sort of like a monkey controlled island. And there's one where basically you go into a temple which has been built to be an ancient temple by as in it's only like a couple of years old, but they've built it to look ancient. And all of the rooms, and it's like a parody. So like there's a snake pit, but they haven't bothered feeding the snakes, so they're all dead. So you just climb out. And then the final room is a Towers of Hanoi puzzle, which has something like 10 rods. So it would take like many, many thousands of moves in order to finish it. Or you could do the correct solution, which is you go and buy some dynamite and you blow up the wall.
I think I know what one of your favorite puzzles in Zork Grand Inquisitor also is, because
give it a
it's
shot.
mine. That would be the one where you have the Seventh Guest style chessboard in front of you.
Rock like rock.
Yeah, and you smash it. That's one of my favorite. I always loved that puzzle.
I love that puzzle.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. And rewinding a little bit, you said like you in an Indiana Jones game, like you'll have the momentum and then you stop. So what you're saying is that you don't particularly enjoy doing surveying work in front of like tombs on the island of Crete, because actually I thought that was the most interesting part of the game, just kind of walking around with a survey.
I think Faith of Atlantis for me actually does it pretty well, because again, they kind of lean into Indy as an archaeologist, throughout the whole game, which is fine, and I think it works within that context. I think that if it was a more like action-packed game, and then suddenly it slowed down so you could put theodolites all around Crete, is that what it is? Then I would be less into it, but it has the thing is that version of Indie Hell I think does enough work to make like the Moonstone puzzles and like the theodolite puzzles, like kind of charging up engines or whatever, feel appropriate to the setting. Whereas, like I said, if it was like all Nazi punching and then suddenly it sort of stops all of its momentum for a puzzle, not so much.
Well, let me ask then, while we're talking puzzles, and ones that I felt like just completely halted the momentum of the game, but I think I'm in the minority here. How do you feel about Le Serpent Rouge from Gabriel Knight 3? This one is famous. People love it. They say it's one of the best puzzles of all time. It was not for me.
I like the idea more than I like the execution.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't want to be sounding sort of too like. I think it's a really clever puzzle. I really love how she works in the idea, like sort of the sacred geometry and honestly, a lot of the stuff which is wrapped around it. Like when Grace sort of has to sort of stop, take a break for a while, and then some sort of stuff happens. My main problem with Le Serpent Rouge, it's not really challenging in that you put the things in the only place it lets you put the things, and then kind of it I would have really liked it if like more of the game was about like sort of slowly piecing together that like the map which you end up with from exploring the territory, rather than like having like Grace just sort of sitting down for a long afternoon of like just playing on her computer. But I think the concept is brilliant, and I think stretch it out across the entire game and kind of make it more that Grace has to go out and like investigate stuff while she's doing the puzzle. And I think it would be perfect. It's all in one big chunk, and you kind of know half the stuff which you're drawing because there isn't anywhere else that'll let you do it. So
That's kind of interesting. That makes me think of like with huge kind of grand puzzles, like it is like we were just talking about like the moonstones, and that's kind of like an ongoing like piece
Mm.
by piece by piece puzzle that runs the almost the entire length, essentially the entire length of Fate of Atlantis. And so it's like, this has just got me thinking, and I don't have a like of like kind of paced out puzzles, versus like having, as you said, like Grace sitting at her computer for a long time and just
Here's the chapter where I use my laptop.
here's the chapter where I wander around a library in Gabriel Knight. Where's that museum?
Museum, I believe. Yeah,
it's both. It's both.
Yeah.
It's two museum. It's one museum, the Castle Neuschwanstein, which I've been to and is much bigger than in the game, and also the Schattenjäger Library, which she spends ages looking up werewolves. Look under W, Grace.
What I like about that is that it kind of, it's like, yes, that is what someone would do, but is that interesting for a
Is that a game? Yeah. Like,
I think Gabriel Knight 2, again, it's a pacing thing where I love the concept. I think that the bits where you have to go and investigate things are a bit too focused on you looking at literally everything. As in, they will lock you in place until you have clicked on every damn pixel in those museums. And so while I think it works really well for Grace, I wouldn't mind it being a little bit gentler as a... Like, when you found the thing, the story can progress. We don't necessarily have to look at every single thing to kind of get the gist of it. Or alternatively, we could have, like, later on, if something comes up you haven't found, you'd be like, oh, I wonder if there's anything about that at the museum. And then you could kind of go back and look at it. But I know that every time I've played The Beast Within, I've gotten the clues because I know what I'm looking for. And then a lot of time it's like, what do I have to click so that it will accept that I'm ready to go to the next bit? And again, I am not being down. I think The Beast Within is amazing. It's one of my favorite FMV games. But again, those sections are a little bit poorly paced.
Well, that makes me think about, and I don't know if I severely doubt that you have to deal with these right now, Richard. And I don't know if you have to, Jess. But it, like, I have to every year, like for work, have to take like video trainings on don't harass people in a workplace, don't don't do this, this is what you do when there's a fire.
I'm self-employed and I work from home, so like... honestly, harassing yourself is supposedly one of the benefits,
but what's great about those tests that we have to about those tests we have to do, so that's what I thought Jack Around the Gym was about. Now is that
can I just say that you're probably thinking
please.
The Alone in the Dark spin-off, Jack in the Dark.
Oh no. Anyway, so it's like you watch these terribly acted videos, which I think that would be an acting role I would love to do. I would love to be an actor that solely gets to act in, don't harass people in the workplace videos. But anyway, then you have to answer quiz questions. And then once you've completed those quiz questions, it might say to you, you need to be on the screen longer. Because they figured out that people just hit next, and then say it's like, are you if you were in this scenario, what would you say? And then it was like 5 offensive options, and then one, how are you doing today? Like, and then you click that, and it says, wait, did you watch the whole video? And that's how I'm kind of feeling about this Grace thing, which is, it's just like, no, it doesn't matter that you know exactly where to click. You have to go through all of it. How dare you? We wrote everything in this library, and you're going to enjoy it.
We had to fill little inserts of Grace like bending over to look thoughtfully at a book. It's like, you're going to watch that video. We spent a lot of money on this game. Listen,
I've just decided that hell consists of Josh Mandel writing a game like that. Not only will you watch it, you will laugh at every single pun. And this is a guy when he wrote Callahan's Cross Time Saloon. There's scenes like there's a scene in a coffee shop where there's about 10 different drawers of coffee, and every single one of them has a multi-line pun attached to it. If he turned his talents to evil, then people would be begging Satan to get back to the pitchforks.
Why hasn't Sam Barlow made a game based on those workplace instructional videos? Like, that feels like the next immortality. Like, you click on something in the sexual harassment video that takes you to new video content and
Immortality 2, and it's the same fucked up story about this bizarre actress that's lived for 50 years or whatever, except that she's only been in anti-harassment videos. So it's like really haunting and strange, but she's acting.
I was thinking, from the maker of Telling Lies, Taking Liberties.
Oh
no! Her lawsuit.
Sam, we know you're a listener, so this idea is all yours. We relinquish all claims.
And Ben would like to star.
Oh yeah, and I would like to star. I would like to be
I
want to be the creep in these videos.
Creep 1 on your Moby Games page.
I only have one acting credit. My otherwise my Moby Games page is all special thanks for Kickstarters. That's true. That's true. You can look me up. It's like, wow, what's Ben's credit history? It's like, oh, they log all the Kickstarter special thanks.
Well, Richard, we were talking before the stream. Ben and I think I was probably first exposed to your work in your Crapshoot column, where you tackled some of the bright spots and arguably dimmer spots of gaming history. And Ben and I were both talking about how much we just love these old columns. We've both gone back and read a few here and there. I was curious, if you could tell us a little bit about Crapshoot, games that really stand out for you that you wrote about there, ones that you found just like particularly perplexing or soul crushing, or however you want to approach that.
Crapshoot was kind of interesting. It was a column I wrote for PC Gamer for many years. The original idea, when they kind of came to me and said, "You'd like to write a column for us," was we'd like you to do a funny column about the worst games ever made. And I was like, I don't really want to do that, because the thing is, it might seem strange that a British games journalist wouldn't like writing negative reviews, but honestly, most of us don't. In that you're writing for an audience, and so you're paid to be sarcastic and funny and acerbic or whatever. But generally, we like good games. We want to support good games, and the idea of specifically picking on something kind of each week just didn't feel right. So what I said was, how about we meddle with that kind of a bit and make it weird and wonderful and interesting games, some of which are going to be bad. In fact, quite a lot of them are objectively bad, but it's not really about them being bad games. It's about them being interestingly bad or interestingly good or just really obscure. Like sometimes it can be as simple as the fact that there is a shooter game called Bert Higgins, the Man from Hell, which is a bit like a RoboCop style thing, in which I think you play as like this futuristic warrior who just happens to be called Bert Higgins. But then you'd also get other stuff like, say, Conquest of the Longbow, which at the time was pretty obscure, where there is so much cool stuff that nobody ever brought up because it was like one of the lesser known Sierra games.
I think about that one that you wrote about, Conquest, because that's one of my absolute favorite Sierra games, Conquest of the Longbow. And I think about like I remember reading that piece and being like, yeah, man, he's right.
Yes.
He's right.
Pumping
This
your
game
fist
kicks
toward the
ass.
end. Yeah.
But like I said, the idea each time wasn't specifically to tear into something, or if it was something which really deserved it, usually. There is one I can think of which I feel really bad about because I don't know what the hell was going on that day. But it's a game which I don't actually dislike, but when I can look back through the archives, it's like, Jesus Christ. Just sort of ripping this thing a new one. It's like I must have been in the worst of moods that day. But like I said, most of it,
6. What? Like a good game.
King's Quest
It's
6 was
been well
okay.
known. I don't even know how that was covered.
No, I think it was Kingdom of Magic, which is just like, it's not a great game, but it's like I've actually got quite a soft spot for it. And so, like reading back, it was like, who wrote this? And oh my god, it was me. But a lot of the time, it was very much about finding like weird and wonderful. So I mean, like for example, Bureau 13, which is on the surface, it's a sort of X-Files style thing where you play a sort of a secretive organization that goes into a small town to investigate weird X-Files type stuff. Except for some reason, one of the characters is in her underwear and riding a giant mech suit. And it is the least subtle thing you could possibly imagine.
Right.
Or Conspiracies, which is like a Tex Murphy wannabe game, where the main character's voiceover is one of my favorite things ever. I highly recommend checking out video of it. And again, sometimes it was just like stuff which people just didn't know existed. Like one of the earliest ones, I sort of started off by talking about how Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis was pretty rubbish, so that nobody would possibly like it. And then after the jump, it was like, I am, of course, referring to the arcade game, which, of course, people hadn't seen. So I think it's sort of difficult to like. My personal favorites were usually either games that I liked and was able to kind of give a better view to, or something which I was able to do something fun with. Like one which kind of springs to mind is there's a game called the Unicorn Killer, which is like a hidden object game, which is based on an actual serial killer, which just struck me as being the most poor taste concept. And so I wrote the entire thing basically as like a detective story, except all diegetic. So they're literally solving the case by finding like the 10 windmills kind of positioned around the screen, or like, look, I found a loaf of bread. This will lead us to him. Or there's like a Les Miserables beat 'em up from Japan called Arm Joe. And so I wrote the entire thing as a parody of the Les Miserables musical, like multiple songs, to the actual thing. But yeah, it was a weird series to write because there was no real planning. I would basically sit down on Friday evening.
Uh-huh.
I would decide what to cover. I would start writing, and it would go live at 8 a.m. the next morning. And so I was usually playing through it at like 3, 4 a.m. and just basically like stream of consciousness. So, a lot of the time they're not very well edited because there was no editing.
I was going to say, I
was just rapping my keyboard.
Right.
And then usually I would finish about like 10 minutes before I had to post it. And then it was like, I hope you'll find this funny. Click.
It's funny what you said about like interesting, like, because I with a group of my friends and including my buddy Grayson, who did Kid Named Ice Boy.
Great game.
We watch bad movies, and we've been watching bad movies like together as a group of friends for the last 4 years. And a thing that I like, having watched a lot of them, is that the ones that are always really interesting to me are the ones that like betray something about like the point of view of the people that made it, or like there's something like, because anything could be bad, but to be interestingly bad, it has to have certain qualities. And so like, what you were saying about the Crapshoot games, that made me think of.
I mean, I think for me, a lot of the time, it's even a bad game can have something really interesting about it. And often they have really good ideas, and they're not ideas you see again because nobody played it. And
Right.
so, people will steal from like Sierra and LucasArts and Revolution, kind of all of the big names. But then you'll just find something. I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but something like, say, the original Cryo Dune game and how it like merged like strategy and the adventure things to do something
kind of like
completely
Dune.
unique.
The French Dune.
That's the one, yeah.
The French Dune, Le Dune.
Le Dune. Or you'd have something like the Muppets Inside, which was sort of a genuinely kind of funny game, or Malpati Island, which sort of used this sort of really weird like text to speech system, or the Discworld mud, which is just so big it will blow your mind. Just look at if you look at a single map from the Discworld mud, and then that is like a millionth of the size of the game. Wow. And it generally has like an active population of like, I don't know, 20, 30 at the last time I looked. It's just so weird.
And Richard, I'm so glad you brought up Discworld.
Thank you.
Because I actually have a time-sensitive question for you. I am considering, I haven't decided what I'm going to stream on my Twitch channel tonight, and I'm considering Discworld 2. Should I stream Discworld 2? Let me tell you my experience with Discworld 1. It was fine, but a little exhausting. Should I stream Discworld 2?
More than a little exhausting, my opinion.
My favorite thing about Discworld 1, just to very quickly mention, is if you look at the speed runs, they actually involve time travel. In that there's a glitch which basically, just sort of involves skipping around time to kind of like get items, or something. I forget the exact details, but I remember that being really fun. Discworld 2 is much less strenuous than Discworld 1. It's a much easier game. It's also much less Pratchett-esque. They really kind of lean way more into Python. And the thing with Discworld 2 is I enjoyed it, but it's very fanny as a game, and as in, like, it's you'll walk into like a random building and it's like, oh look, it's Granny Weatherwax, and you walk into the next room like, oh, now you're in Death's Domain.
Very small.
It's more that it'll try to pull in a lot of stuff, but it's a bit like the theme park Discworld to me. Whereas I think Discworld Noir is, if you can get it running, which is not an easy feat, it feels much more like a Discworld game to me, where Discworld 2 sort of feels more like a Discworld experience. It's like it's a theme park ride. You will see your favorite characters, you will see remixes of some of your favorite stories, but you can also kind of just be like, well, that's from that, that's from that, that's from that. And a lot of there's a bit in it where you literally walk into the stoning sequence from Life of Brian, and it flashes up at the bottom of the screen like gratuitous Python scene. And like for me, that's like I want to play a Pratchett game. I love Discworld. Discworld is my favorite series basically of all time. It's the most important books to me, and so like Discworld 2, it's not like I'm offended by it. It's a perfectly good game, and as licensed games go, it's actually really good. But it doesn't have that feel of actually being in Discworld. It has the feeling of being in like a world intended to remind you of Discworld whenever you look at. Like Rincewind is Eric Idle. He's not Rincewind.
Yes,
at least to me. And I think that was also the case with Discworld 1 to some extent. With Discworld 2, they just really, like, we've got Eric Idle, of course we're going to do it. And so like at one point, I know they even plan to use "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" as the game's theme song. And
wow!
And the story goes that basically they asked him if they could have permission, and his response was like, kind of, "Oh no, let's not do that. Let's make something new up." And he wrote this new song called "That's Death," which sort of plays at the start. That's death. Say, no need to take a breath. Just lie around all day with not a single bill to pay. Hooray! And all of that kind of stuff. And again, it's cool, but it's Eric Idle. It's not.
Yeah.
I just want to also note, while you've been talking, I've been looking at maps of the Discworld mud, and it is
the people who make the Discworld have my absolute respect. That is an incredible piece of work.
Jesus Christ!
And like I said, when it comes to Discworld stuff, I'm very picky because I have played the Discworld games that nobody knows about. Because there were two of them released on 8-bit computers by the
Color
guys who made.
Magic.
Yeah, that's the one. By the
Yeah.
guys who wrote The Town with No Name. So,
Well, how are those?
they're pretty much like straight conversions of the story, as I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think Discworld. If I could pick one license to have a crack at myself, it would be Discworld. I would love to do a Discworld game.
Oh, well, that was on my list of questions, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I was curious if there was any game you could get your hands on. Discworld.
That is about the only license I can think of that I would The thing is, I would never dream of trying to write a Discworld book. I think that's Terry's thing, and I would never dream of thinking I could do that. But I do think I could write a good game. I think I could come up with something which was interesting, deep, and something which I, as a long-term fan, would love to play. Because for me, a lot of it is for me, Discworld was a constant companion. From the age of about 10 onwards until basically the bitter end. The only one I haven't read is Raising Steam, and the reason I haven't read it, I got it on launch, is because reading that one would mean that it's over.
Yeah.
The only time I think I will read that book is if the miracle million billion to one chance that Rihanna and co allow me to have a crack at it, then I would read it. Otherwise, I don't think I will ever read it, because again, that is the end. I have read The Shepherd's Crown because I thought that was an important one to finish off Granny's story, because the first one I read was Equal Rights, so it felt like starting with Equal Rights, ending with Shepherd's Crown. That was a wrap up that I could do, but I like to kind of have this idea that Discworld is still alive. There's still new stories being told there, and I would love basically to write a Discworld game specifically because I want to go back to that world, and I want to spend more time in that world. And I wouldn't trust most other people to write it, and I'm not saying they should trust me. I'm just saying that I wouldn't trust them because it is precious to me. And I at least know that if I were to do it, and even if I made an absolute mess of it, it would be a mess with the absolute best intentions of wanting to do right by the license. And I would love to do that. And there aren't any other licenses I can think of which I feel like that about. I mean, for example, even ones where theoretically it'd be cool, like the wrapper of them is so problematic. I think it'd be really fun to make a Doctor Who game, but I think that the constraints that you would be under would make it not fun in the slightest. I would quite like to make a supervillain game starring Kermit the Frog, but they would never let me do that. And they shouldn't, but it's an idea which I thought was funny a few years ago. But Discworld, I actually have a folder of what I would do in the. It's it's kind of it's sort of one of my. It's not the only one, but I've kind of got a lot of sort of fantasy game designs that I kind of sort of keep around, and a lot of the time it's kind of nobody will ever let me make X, but it's in my head. I kind of want to get out of my head, and maybe I'll get some ideas from it that I could use at something else later on. But Discworld, yeah, I have a pitch. I would like to make that pitch just to have done it, but but at least get this game out of the way first, and then maybe send them something basically with the email. I know you'll say no, but I had to do this to get it out of my head.
If I could, I don't want you to reveal all of your secrets, but is there the sub-series of Discworld, City Watch, The Witches, etc. Is your pitch in one of those sort of subsections in particular, or does it sort of span the Discworld canon,
or like Discworld Noir, which is a
it's not really an original story. It's a platform on which stories can be told. I think it's kind of the best way to sort of sum it. So the way I see it. Hell, let's just go into this brief. I won't talk much about the idea because the millions of people listening might steal it, and I don't want to do that. But to me, the way that you don't write a Discworld game is you have sort of a brand new character who walks up to the city gates, and you're met by Captain Vimes, who is kind of, oh, you're an interesting fellow. The patrician will want to go and see you, and you go and speak to the patrician, and he says, oh, I'll be keeping an eye on you, but first, here's a quest to go and kill 3 rats in the basement of the Mended Drum, and then you go and you find a room at Mrs. K, and it's just no. that's not how you have to
Right.
you have to treat it with a sense of I almost like realism isn't quite like detachment's not quite the case either. But I think what I would want to do, and what my entire scheme is basically, is to put the player into a real world, which is Discworld.
Mm.
And so rather than just like rehashing like the books, because we've all read them. If you're playing a Discworld game, you've read all of the books. It's like, what can you build on this with? You know, where can we go that the books haven't covered, and in interesting and kind of cool ways? And a lot of it's like sort of building on the structures which are in there. So like you got like the guilds, you've got the newspapers, you've got all of the like the characters, you've got like all these sort of cool locations which are venues for building stories. And my personal belief is that a good licensed game isn't just a copy of something that you've seen before. You have that, but equally, it's not about tearing it down. They did a TV series a few years ago called The Watch.
I was going to, I was going to bring it up.
I have angry thoughts about The Watch, because watching that game, watching that series, it had this feeling of absolute contempt for the books.
Yep.
It was just ripping everything down. It's like, no, we could do better. We could do better. We could do better.
You can't.
No, you can't. you can't. And like doing it in that way to me is offensive, and especially what they did with some of the specific characters, and how I know that they've been, taken up by fans over the years, is specifically offensive, especially with some of the stuff they did with the dwarves. But equally, I don't think that you do a good licensed game by sticking straight to the source. I think it is important to build on it. You have to change stuff. You have to kind of find your own stamp to put on it. You have to find your own direction to take it, which is why I think Discworld Noir works so well. And it does a lot of stuff which, within like the confines of a license, is actually pretty unusual. Like, for example, they use the City Watch, for instance. The City Watch is generally, I mean, there are exceptions, like The Truth and a couple of other ones where you sort of see the Watch as a bit more like authoritarian and kind of not particularly nice. But Luton in Discworld Noir has an actual antagonistic relationship with Vimes, and so you're sort of seeing him as a much nastier figure than you're kind of customarily used to sort of seeing. And you wouldn't really kind of sort of get that in, say, a Star Trek game if you want it to make, Captain Kirk into a dick or something like that.
Yeah.
They're not going to let you do that. But it was perfectly suited for what Discworld Noir was going for. That mood, that sort of setting, that kind of atmosphere, that doing a new thing from the books by doing what they did in a different way, of taking a theme and then making it Discworld. And I think that's the best way of going about it. And my kind of like design is sort of in a sort of similar way, but on like a much more fractal kind of level. Again, like stories about stories, and interesting things that you can do in that setting without just popping a wizard hat on your head and saying the world is doomed, go and save the world. It's like it's not that.
I think it's interesting, and you said this in here. It's just like when somebody like licenses like a property, or if they bring back like new Star Trek shows or whatever, it does feel like bad adaptations are always in two different directions, which is either what you just said, where it's like the slavish fan stuff, which is like kind of demeaning to like to a fan, where it's like, all right, today you're going to Babylon 5 and you're best friends with Captain Sheridan, and you're going to hang out with Ivanova and even kiss Byron a little bit. And that was just for you.
With a commemorative plate.
And but then also the other one, as you said, because I was thinking about this as you were talking, I started thinking about that awful Watch show, which is like, yeah, then it's, or it could be made by people with absolute contempt of the property, who have no interest. And then but then like it's very hard. And like I go back to Star Trek because it has contained every version of this.
Yes.
Like Star Trek being
It
such
contains
a
multitudes.
massive, and Doctor Who as well, like has contained every version of, it's like it's been in hands, like there's the original, and then it goes away, and then a generation later it's made by fans, and fans of it who are either who either don't get how to tell an interesting story with that, or they do, and you can always tell. Like, I'll go to Doctor Who, because it's just like you could tell, because then they'll either use it as a platform to resolve plot threads that bothered them when they were 12, or they'll make the Doctor remarkably super powerful, and everybody loves the Doctor because that's how they viewed them as like a 6-year-old.
Well, I mean, to use Discworld in particular, I think it's the kind. I think with all licenses, but again, this is about Discworld specifically. I think if you're going to do a licensed game, and I should point out that I'm not like unaware that like licensing stuff comes with a whole host of like issues. I'm not blaming any individual developer, like if their games sort of weren't able to do this. I get it. I honestly do. I'm talking purely in like fan terms. When I'm sort of talking about like what I want from these sort of games, it's, are you leaving the property better than you found it? And that doesn't mean rewriting. That just means like have you like made your mark on it in a positive way? Have you built on it? Have you given people a good experience they wouldn't otherwise have had? Have you basically lived up to the license, not by proving that you can copy it, but proving that you can add to it? And, yeah.
Well, now, after hearing all of this, I'm just wadding up my pitch for a Moist von Lipwig game where he launches a game studio. That was going to be my game. And now I feel like it'd just be, now I'm not doing the right adaptation.
Yeah. The nice thing about, thinking about doing a Discworld game is that I know Rihanna, and I also know that if I was to do a bad game, she would physically murder me. Which is like, it's a good incentive to do good work.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't for a second think that they will bite, but it's a thing which I want to pitch, because otherwise I will know that I didn't pitch it. And if they do say yes for some reason, then awesome. I think that'll be really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because, one of the things that Ben and I both, when we were talking about what we wanted to talk about with you today, we're really curious about this transition, going from someone who wrote about games for years to now a writer for games yourself, a writer and designer. And I guess we're curious, what were the challenges there? How did the process of writing about games inform your career as someone who's now writing actual games themselves?
Well, I mean, I'd say that a big thing for me is that having played a lot of games, you get to know a lot of games, which doesn't mean that you're necessarily kind of good at making the sort of transition, but it does mean you have a really good like mental catalogue of things to draw from. Individual things which you've seen, which maybe other people haven't, and for me, like the transition was almost like accidental. It was something I'd always kind of wanted to do. I mean, here's a fun fact. I actually wrote one of the jokes in Leisure Suit Larry 7.
Oh.
Yeah. There was a competition to submit jokes for the animatronic Bill Clinton. And the prize, basically, if you won the competition, then you got a credit, apparently. I didn't do that. But everyone else basically got a free copy of the game. And I wrote one of Bill Clinton's jokes in Larry 7.
What was the joke?
I honestly don't remember.
I
think it was very good. It's in it. Oh, it's in it. It made it. I can't remember offhand what it was. But
I can't imagine what there'd be to joke about with Bill Clinton.
I think it's actually one of the first things he sort of says, where it's actually awkward, because I did the joke that like a few years later, I sort of heard almost the exact same gag in The Critic. Now I remember the details. Yeah, it's basically when he sort of starts up, and his joke is just literally, "I'm your president," and everyone starts laughing. Then, like a few years later, I was watching the critic, which I think was about the same time. I'm not saying they saw the gag. It's just like it's obviously an obvious gag, but they had sort of a similar thing, with like I am your president, and
The Bill Clinton joke I think about from the critic is the one where they go to like the knockoff Disney Hall of Presidents and they just put in one of the hillbilly bears.
Country Bear Jamboree Bears.
They're the bears who sing for Duke Doodah.
That's right.
Wow, deep critic dive here that totally unexpected. I'm here for it.
But no, I mean, in terms of like to do traditional, because it was always something I'd kind of wanted to do. I'd actually, written. Basically, the reason I got into like the games writing side specifically was that while I was just bored one day, I did a parody of the online game Fallen London called Fallen Swindon, where the gag was basically that instead of the Masters of the Bazaar taking Victorian London, down into the depths of the earth and making into this sort of like wonderful sort of steampunk world, they took modern day Swindon. And so instead of like the Echo Bazaar, it's the Tesco Bazaar, and instead of like the romantic poet, it's things like the loquacious chav and like stuff like that. It's a very goofy parody. But it was like a few months later, they were looking for writers to just join their actual team, and I basically put out just sort of did a retweet. So I said, like, this isn't something which I could do. I haven't got like the credentials or whatever to apply, but they seem like cool people. I'd interviewed them a few times and whatever. And I basically just got a DMs and said, look, we know you don't actually have the like what we're asking for in the thing, but if you wanted to apply, we would take your application. Because we've seen like we saw that you basically recreated our system in Twine, so you clearly like know something about how to do this stuff. And I basically said, really flattered, thanks for the offer, but I can't really do that. I would be moving to London and all that kind of stuff. And I said, but then I added cheekily, but if you're ever looking for more guest writers for Sun and the Sea, I would love to do that. And that basically kicked it off because I did one island for Sun and the Sea. And then they kept on calling me back to do more stuff for that, and then Fallen London and Sun the Skies. And they also very kindly passed my details over to some other people, like the Daedalic West, I think it was, who made The Long Journey Home, which is like sort of space, sort of Star Control, fast.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like a Star Control type.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then there were a couple of other games I sort of wrote bits for at the time. And then sort of slowly, I just sort of transitioned to doing that instead of the journalism thing. Because it was a lot more fun. It was a lot more, fulfilling. And you didn't get shouted at by 100 people every time you said anything even slightly mean about their favorite game.
You got now, so like people that really loved like Les Manley, like they were just always in your mentions, right? Like all the Les Manley.
All the Les heads.
Yeah, all the less heads.
You wouldn't so much get him for Les Manley because nobody played that game, but you but you would if you sort of said anything, even something like slightly rude about Leisure Suit Larry, or I did a crapshoot once on Tender Loving Care, and people sort of jumped up and said this is clearly an attempt to sabotage like the upcoming Kickstarter they were working on for something. It's like, no, it wasn't. It was just it was just meant to be a funny funny piece. Mm-hmm. And I did a thing about the arcade game Hologram, and then I got like this guy like sort of going on for hours about how little I understood the arcade market. It's like, okay. But there were some satisfying parts in that kind of crossover. I think my favorite was at one point I said I didn't like the writing of a particular game. Obviously, I got the very sort of snooty, well, let's see you do better. And I was like, it's called Sun the Sea, biatch.
So currently you're working on a game I'm very excited about, and full disclosure, because we believe in journalism ethics around here. I am a backer of this game.
As am I. Yeah.
Yes.
I that's right. Another Moby Games credit for me.
Racking them up. Yeah. Just racking them up.
Now I just want to kind of to do a credit which is really awful, King of shit, Ben.
The worst part, I don't even. Yeah, like please, yeah. Let's see. What now? I gotta look. Let's see. Ben Vigeant.
Biggest fan of Codename Iceman.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Codename Iceman? But tell us all about Nighthawks.
Director for Space Quest 1. VGA. Nighthawks. Right, Nighthawks is basically a project which went completely out of control very, very quickly. Essentially, it was a few years ago. I'd just been to Adventure X, which was it's a big narrative convention in the UK, which I highly recommend people go to. Unfortunately, it was cancelled this year because of some staffing things, but we're hoping it's back again next year. And while there, I was sort of fiddling around, like I kind of want to make a game, of some sort, like nothing too complicated, like something simple. And so I kind of came up with this very easy thing which I could make in Unity, probably. If I kind of loaded up. I didn't know how to do any of it. I sort of knew basic programming from some other stuff, but I just wanted to make something from scratch. Because I've been writing other people's games for a few years at this point, and I wanted to do something which was just short and simple. And because something I'd often thought about in the past was how cool it would be to have basically Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines meets Fallen London. Mm-hmm. And they'd released this game called, is it Prelude or Prologue? I think it's Prelude, which basically used like a mobile phone interface. So like very sort of simple menus and sort of not that much in the way of kind of graphics and sound.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool. So, let's put those together. Let's sort of do it like a simple, like detective-y type game. And so I started working on this just for fun. And after I kind of got like a few rooms demo kind of sort of done, I basically sort of did a very jokey post on Twitter with like a screenshot and sort of saying, something like, so, Paradox, you want to give me the license or anything? And obviously it's a joke. And then the then head of White Wolf then replied saying, yeah, show us what you've got.
Wow.
And I think the words at that point were, oh shit. Because and so what I figured was I knew that there wasn't any sort of chance they were going to accept like a pitch. I wouldn't have accepted a pitch, but I thought this is actually a good opportunity to practice pitch writing. And so I put together basically a pitch for like a game kind of in the Nighthawks style, which is like a sort of very sort of text driven, simple graphics, sort of visual. It's sort of visual novel in style, but like in interactions, it's a bit different. But I put together this sort of pitch called Nighthawks, Vampire Masquerade Nighthawks, and I worked out a story. I kind of worked out some basic characters. I sent it in, and inevitably they said no. And so cool. No harm, no foul. I didn't expect them to say yes. It was purely a thought experiment. And then I was just like, but I kind of like this idea. And so and it's like there's a gap in the market because Bloodlines was a long time ago and nothing new had been announced.
And the sequel keeps going.
Exactly. At this point, the sequel hadn't been revealed in any form.
Okay, yeah.
There were kind of rumors they were working on. Actually, they were working on something, but I don't think they'd outright said that they were doing Bloodlines 2. And so I basically, that's kind of what the order of the Kickstarter was. I sort of spoke to Dave. It was like, I've got this idea. We've been talking about working together for like over 10 years at this point. Mm-hmm. We became friends. When I was writing very nice things about his early games, and so I put together a pitch basically for Dave. And so I said, well, this is probably going to be a Kickstarter thing because we need funding for art and voices and all that kind of stuff. And essentially, it kind of like a runaway train from there to doing the Kickstarter, and then on to actually working on the game. And the game itself it's a vampire visual novel style game, which is way longer than I think people are expecting it to be. It's currently at about 750,000 words.
That's a lot of words.
This is why it's taken a while, amongst other reasons.
In fairness, some of those words are repeated, right? Those aren't.
Okay. They're not all unique words.
No, and in fact, when you play the game, they're all in alphabetical order.
Oh, good.
Perfect. That make it easy to pick up where you left off.
It's a bit like Dark Souls. You kind of like you piece together the narrative from the pieces. It's just in this case they're individual consonants. But no, it's basically it's an urban fantasy like vampire game, but it's sort of the antithesis of Vampire the Masquerade. Mostly because there is absolutely no point trying to fight Vampire the Masquerade. They have Vampire the Masquerade. They are going to do Vampire the Masquerade better than anybody coming along and trying to do Vampire the Masquerade. So a lot of Nighthawks is like, let's flip it. And so it's set in a world where vampires, basically 8 years ago, The Secret came out. And it came out by accident. And the story is basically about a world adjusting to this new normal. And it's like, where do we go from here? Like, because there's no putting this genie back into the bottle. And, vampires are here. And they're not all evil, because, again, I know a lot of people will say, it's a bit like True Blood. It's like a bit in kind of concept. But with True Blood, the vampires are pretty much all evil. And that was something that was really bugged me about it, because it kind of destroyed a lot of like the metaphor that they were going with. But basically, there's like 2 not evil vampires in the entire series. And in Nighthawks, they're not all evil, but a lot of them have had to do things they didn't want to in the name of survival. And mostly is sort of focusing on how lonely that kind of existence is. And so the main characters are essentially brought together into the setting. Nighthawks is a seedy nightclub in the corner of this fictional town, which kind of becomes a place where everyone comes together and finds the family which they've never had in the past. Basically, all of the companion characters are kind of outcasts. They're lonely, but they're sort of trying to figure out who they are in the new world, along with the world around them. And so essentially, the game is sort of made up of stories exploring different aspects of human and vampire interaction. And a lot of it is, there's some of it which is like big and dramatic, but a lot of the stuff which I think is more fun is the smaller scale stuff. Like, for example, how is it psychologically when you forget what you look like? What is it like? What is it like to have your existence just be perpetual night?
Yeah.
And then there's some like off the cuff sillier stuff as well. Like, there's a scene where one character comes in because they've just been hit by a car because the guy reversed, and because she didn't appear in the mirror, he hit her. Or there's gags about like, how do you put on makeup if you can't see yourself? Like one character was saying that basically they got so fed up of trying, they just had it all tattooed onto them because it sort of saved effort. And so you got this sort of interesting. I think it's interesting sort of mix up where you have like monsters, but you also have just regular people who happen to be in this really unusual situation, and nobody really knows what the next step is. Because obviously you've got people trying to contain the situation. You've got other people trying to sort of like push for like, freedom and, sort of more expanse. And then your character basically is by chance stuck in the middle and kind of ends up in a position where they get to kind of be the deciding factor in the next few years for the world. And so I think it's an interesting concept. I think it's a take on vampires that I haven't seen before. Obviously, I've seen bits of it in other things. Like I said, True Blood is the obvious, touchstone. But it's some of it's horrible, some of it's funny, some of it I think is going to break people's hearts, and that's my intention. And it's been way longer than I ever expected it to, thanks to like COVID and some personal kind of things. So I'm really grateful to our Kickstarters for waiting this long, and for being so patient and being so nice about being patient. Honestly, I think in the entire course of the Kickstarter, we've had like 5 negative comments.
Wow.
or something like that.
I apologize. I apologize for that.
I mean, that is why you are credited as king of shit. I mean, I hold my grudges. A grudge is a poor thing to waste.
Yeah.
But no, it is genuinely, being so nice to have people like responding to the Kickstarter updates, so positively. When there have been delays, people kind of go, yeah, we understand. Just let us know when it's done. We'll wait. We'll kind of play it. And and the fact that we're now basically facing off against the biggest vampire licensing games with a budget of, let's just say, more than ours, and an entire team working on it, as opposed to basically 2 of us, it's a bit intimidating. But we're doing our best, and we hope that people like it. We should sell at least 5 copies. Would be 6, but my parents told me that they would share one.
Oh, that's very kind.
I can't wait. I mean, it looks fantastic. I mean, I like thinking too much about vampires. I mean, I teach a whole college course that delves into a bunch of vampire related stuff. And I like just sort of having to piece together what this existence would look like in the real world. Because, I mean, again, yeah, True Blood's the obvious touchstone, but also True Blood got bored with exploring that like an episode and a half in. And now it's like, we're just going to have sexy vampire stories because every vampire story turns into a sexy vampire story.
And then it was all werewolves and shifters and fairies. And one of the things with Nighthawks is it's just vampires. And the way I sort of say it is that I'm not saying that there aren't werewolves and like ghosts and all these other things out there, as well. But that's not what the game is about. The game is specifically about vampire stuff, so that we can drill down really deep into what makes vampires. And one of the things which I love about vampires in a gaming context is you have so many interesting rules. Like the in the sun thing, the reflection thing. In Nighthawks, that's actually taken a step further. Vampires don't record audio. You don't see them on tape. They don't leave fingerprints. And so that's something which is it's a two-edged sword, because on the one hand, it makes them really hard to arrest because you have no evidence. But equally, it means people don't trust them because they're always kind of thinking, well, what are they getting up to? And a lot of the stories, like basically every individual story is a theme on a theme. So it could be there's a bit early on, for instance, where you need to get into a house to interrogate somebody, but you can't get in because you have to be invited. Mm-hmm. And it's explicit, like you can't hypnotize your way. You have to be genuinely invited in. And there's that one, and later on there's another one where you're trying to get an invitation for another vampire who the person inside does not want to meet by tricking them into extending an invitation so they can kind of open the door and kind of be gotcha. And again, like all of the stories, like sort of something along those sort of lines. The threshold rule's kind of a cool one. Lots of like individual frustrations. Sometimes just the minor things are the most interesting. Like if you get injured, then anesthetic doesn't work, and so you're basically looking at like having like your ribs cracked open, by a guy with a bone saw, because that's all you can do. Or like the annoyances of like drinking blood in this setting isn't that great. Blood it tastes like blood. You're thirsty for it, but it's not that interesting. So you've got these sort of little throwaway lines like your bartender at the nightclub, which you come to at the end of Act 1, and yes, there are references to how cliched it is to have a vampire running a nightclub. I am not unaware of that, but it was a good like sort of central place. But she's sort of saying things like, most of their regulars sprinkle cinnamon into the blood because it helps to sort of take away some of the iron aftertaste. Or when she's sort of talking to one of the other characters like Madame Lux, and she's referring basically some graffiti that she's seen outside the club, kind of the get back to your coffin sort of type like anti-vampire thing. And she's sort of saying like, I'm sorry, I'll clean this up as soon as possible. Like, oh, don't worry about it. You're really not offended? I mean, I couldn't stand people thinking I was a monster. And she says, darling, we are monsters. Some of us are just better at marketing. Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of sort of setting. Like but I think one really important thing about it, which I think separates it from most vampire fiction, is it's intended to be warm. You have all kinds of options to do horrible, horrible things, but overall, those options are mostly there so that you don't pick them. I mean, if you do, then that thing will happen. If you say to kill somebody innocent, that person will die. But it's really more that you need the negative options kind of to reinforce the actually you're probably going to much more enjoy making friends and being like the friendly neighborhood vampire and kind of being the I am better than you think I am kind of vampire. And even that can like sort of take multiple forms, because you can be that, but you can also have like wildly different versions of how the future should be. But ultimately, I kind of want people to reach the end and just sort of feel good that I have made the night a little bit lighter And if that's all I could do, then it was worth doing.
Well, Jess, I think
Please buy my game.
yeah.
Yes, that's what we really want to drive home here.
Wish list is the call to action on this usually,
Yeah,
right? Like
that's the
like
one,
a Steam wish list.
That's right.
Steam wish list.
Right now, the screens and the trailers are like very old. They will be looking nice from the new year. I just haven't got around to updating them yet. So it's actually looking quite a bit prettier, and there will be a new trailer when we have time to do it. Right now, I'm racing to kind of get the beta out to backers, which is going to be probably the start of the new year.
Wow.
And that's basically going to then run us to release as we like try and beat it into submission. The game's basically done. It's the bug fixing and then the marketing run, which we have to do before we can release it to the world and I can sleep.
Jess, do we have anything else that we wanted to hit?
I think that covered most of the questions I had in my notes.
Yeah.
Richard, is there anything else you'd like to communicate to the millions and millions of people listening to Quest?
The millions.
I would just say that usually when I kind of look back on my own work, the words that come to mind are "I'm sorry." It's like it seemed funny at the time,
That covers for a lot So no, you're good there. Thank you so much, Richard, for being here. This wasn't
rubbish.
So wait, Space Quest 2 is right. Okay, let's pause for a second.
All right. Oh, okay. Pause
everyone who is like great to move on to your next podcast in your queue. Just wait just a second. Now I know that you are a famed disparager of Space Quest 2. And, there were times in my life, like if you go back and read my old Space Quest website, I maybe even said some critical things about Space Quest 2. I have been born again in the light of Space Quest 2.
Trying to baptize you.
Yes, I've been baptized in the swamps of Labion. Now I am an apologist for Space Quest 2. Richard, please tell me why I'm wrong before we wrap things up.
Well, I'd say that there are two key things to keep in mind about Space Quest 2. The first is that for me, what it lacks is the space spanning kind of adventure that I really kind of like. Things like the sequence in Space Quest 3 where you're going to different planets, and for me that's like a running thing. In 4, obviously it's time zones as well, but usually I think for me Space Quest 2 is too small. It's sort of too Star Trek Insurrection kind of a story for my kind of liking. I think that the overall story lets itself down by being goofy. The whole evil insurance salesman thing is,
but it doesn't do anything with that. That's what's always.
Well, I say it's not doing anything because apart from anything else, doesn't he launch them at the end anyway? Anyway, I think it has fantastic graphics. I think that the opening sections are really strong, and then after that, I completely fall asleep. So I don't much like it because it has that sort of sense of being far too small, too linear. It feels more like Future Wars than it does like a Space Quest game. But the second most important reason that I often disparage it is because it really annoys the Space Quest historian, and that is funny to me.
Yeah.
I completely understand that. That is a good enough reason alone. We love you, trolls. Thank you so much.
I mean, how do you feel about Space Quest 5?
It's the best of the series by far.
Yeah, it's the best fight in the series.
If they got rid of a specific maze sequence, which should be fired into space itself, Space Quest 5, I think, is the most consistent, the least player hostile, and the best written. I forget who actually wrote it off the top of my head, but it's certainly the best written of the series. Apologies to Josh. I love your writing, and I love the bits which you wrote in Space Quest 6, and the demo of Space Quest 6 is what made me buy the game. I love kind of sort of clicking around the individual bits, but the overall kind of game writing, I think Space Quest 4 has the best gimmick, Space Quest 5 has the best writing, and Space Quest 6 has the best pixel bitching for jokes. It's easily the best it is apart from that maze.
Yeah, that maze is awful. I just wrapped that up on my stream last night. All right, Jess, is there anything else about Space Quest before we?
Well, let's see. We haven't talked about. No, I think we've got it. I mean, I try not to talk about Space Quest too much because it
Left it
can
all
get
out
out of
on the
control.
field.
That's right. That's right. But no,
Yeah,
Richard, thank you so much.
I just want to say very quickly that something which I thought many years ago, which I will never actually get around to doing, but I think was a fantastic idea and that somebody should do, is a game jam which mods Space Quest 3 to put more planets into it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And all like the EGA sort of style, and it's just like that scene where you go to the map, the sector map,
Yeah,
and
where it stands.
and you only get like the 3 planets and the Monolith Burger.
Right.
I want to see that full of worlds.
Right.
Wow.
I want to like have play the game like every time you play it, like different worlds appear in that. So it's like a roguelike kind of random selection of cool stuff.
I want
not in the stuff from Galaxy of Fantabulous Wonderment if you have to. Just
yes.
Just fill it with cool places to visit.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and also like think of Galaxy of Fantabulous Wonderment. Also, in this is it's like I would get like a disc add-on that just adds more planets for the Eureka to go to in Space Quest 5 because I just want to hang out.
My only issue with that is that the VGA art is harder. Where I think Space Quest 3 has like this, it will be sort of super friendly for a game jam, because basically, not saying that anybody can draw an EJ, that it obviously drawing well is hard, and I can't draw for crap, but I think it would allow more people to kind of create because something I'm really tired of in a lot of games is that the imagination in settings sort of tends to be Fire World, Ice World, Demon World, but I kind of want to have let's have the planet made of spaghetti. Let's have the one where all of the people are different parts of the light spectrum. And I think it'd be really, really cool if like every time you load at Space Quest 3, it was like you don't know what you're going to find.
It would be great if you loaded up Space Quest 3 and it said
Demon World.
Glass bottom boats.
Now you're talking our language.
Glass bottom boat.
Of course, who better than Roger for a nice closet? See, you can watch your stream.
Yeah, no, this is undoubtable proof. Now this pitch for an infinite Space Quest 3 is going to be like all I think about.
Yeah. Someone less lazy than me, please make that because I want to play it.
Yes, we need to weaponize some people toward this end. Because now, especially I think Spaghetti Planet, great place to start.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Once again, thank you, Richard, for joining us. This has been
You're
just
welcome,
an absolute blast. Be sure to wishlist Nighthawks.
Buy my game. Buy my game.
Yeah. Buy his book. Buy my
book.
Going back to the critic. Rate and review us. Send us an email, questquestpodcast@gmail.com, and join us. Oh, brother. Join us next week when we discuss why I still use an ad-lib sound card for all games to this day in 2024. That's then.